So, hello, welcome, Pastor George J. Davis from Impact Church in Jacksonville. Some of you may recognize him local and national news and his vaccine advocacy work here in the community. We are honored to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
First question for you is I want to know what motivated you to get involved and speak out about vaccines.
Well, when I first started speaking out about it, I don't think I even realized that it was controversial. So back when vaccines first became available, there was talk of the vaccines becoming available back in December of last year. To me, it was a no-brainer that you have this potentially deadly virus that we're seeing record numbers of people who are either passing away from it or being seriously ill, and many having long-term serious illnesses coming out of it. And a vaccine would be an absolute blessing in my mind that would help to mitigate the chance of someone catching it. So when the vaccine became available in December of last year, we immediately started making plans to get my parents vaccinated, my wife's parents vaccinated. And then we planned an event at our church back in March in order to help get people vaccinated here at the church. And because we are a community that gathers together, we were able to get a vaccination event set up and had almost 1,000 people come out for it. And again, I was just excited to think that's just a great thing to do. After the second dose of the vaccine, we kind of just said we'll wait and see when's a good time to plan the next one, because there were so many other venues that were holding them. And then in the summer of this year, when the Delta variant really hit Florida tough, we literally had about 6 people pass away in a 2-week span. That were members of our congregation. 3 of them were fairly young, under the age of 35, no significant compromising health conditions. And it just was so frustrating because, here I am having held a huge vaccine event right here at our church, and I had people who didn't show up for it. Now, I knew that the number of people we vaccinated, about 1,000 people, is just a fraction of our church population. We have a church in Jacksonville of about 6,000 people. And so I knew that there were lots of people who didn't attend that event, but I just kind of assumed there were still lots of people who got vaccinated at their healthcare provider, military base, pharmacies, whatever. And so it was pretty heartbreaking to find 6 people pass away in a really short window of time, and all who were unvaccinated. And oddly enough, in a church of this many people, I knew every one of them really well. And so it really made it tough. And I think just out of that moment of frustration, I just determined we're going to hold another event, and we scheduled another vaccination event. And that's when we had another probably almost 300 people come out and be vaccinated at that one. But it was a Twitter post that I made, just out of frustration, just sharing that the 6 people had passed away, that caught the attention of a bunch of news outlets. And literally my phone rang off the hook for about a week until I finally just decided I feel like I've done enough on the media side, and we'll go back to doing what we're doing behind the scenes.
What do you think that was the summer when the Delta variant was raging. You're still continuing to work behind the scenes. What do you think some of the barriers are to people still not getting vaccinated, specifically in the Black faith community, and what keeps you driven right now? I mean, I know we're in the long haul right now. It's almost, comical to think back and think that, this was going to be a 2-week stay at home thing. So what are the biggest barriers, and what sustains you now?
Which is strange, because if we look back, I think if we could have actually gotten everybody to stay home for 2 weeks, we might have been able to curtail this. But I think there's always those outliers who just kind of renegade, refuse to kind of cooperate and do for the better good of the community. But I think one of the things that I've noticed that is a real hindrance to people being vaccinated, especially in the Black community, is a lot of misinformation and disinformation. In the Black community in particular, some of it is based on historically challenging mistreatment of Blacks as it pertains to the healthcare system. Going back to the days of Jim Crow laws and things that it was really tough for Blacks to show up at a local hospital and receive the same care and treatment that a white patient would receive. The Tuskegee experiment is one that people draw to mind on a regular basis. Oddly enough, the Tuskegee experiment wasn't a vaccination or them being injected with something. It was actually medical care being withheld. And so this is really the exact opposite of the Tuskegee experiment. But I think there is in the Black community a natural mistrust when you say medicine and government kind of combined. My grandmother passed away when I was 18. She was a 63-year-old woman who otherwise was healthy, but she had emphysema and something that could have been easily treated, but she refused to go to the doctors and literally, sat at home. Nobody knew she was that ill and passed away because she had a bad experience at a hospital and refused to go to the hospitals anymore. And you hear a lot of that in the community. I think what has driven me is that as we've been able to give people solid information, I would say this is just, there's no empirical data here. It's just from what I can estimate, I would say probably 50 to 60% of the people we talk to, though, when they get good information, they're willing to change their position. So a lot of it is just based on bad information. A lot of people hearing things like this vaccine was something that was rushed. How can they have a vaccine that fast? And it hasn't been tested well. And we haven't seen the long-term effects. And it is true that we don't know the long-term effects, but there's so many things in society that we put into our bodies that we take and don't know the long-term effects. But we do know the long-term effects of COVID, for the person whose body's not able to fight it off. And that's been my rally point, that we don't know all the long-term effects of the vaccination, but we do know the immediate effects of what happens if a person gets COVID and they are one of the few whose bodies doesn't respond well. And it's really mysterious. I've seen people that are strong and healthy, work out every day, and their bodies just didn't respond well to COVID and they've passed away. And I've seen people who had all types of medical conditions get COVID and didn't have a really tough go at it. And so it really is a roll of the dice. And so my argument has been, why roll the dice with COVID? It's better, if you really are that concerned, roll the dice with the vaccine, which would at the very least help to fight off the really detrimental effects of COVID if you were to get it.
When you speak to people, what advice do you have about talking to others? We work at Elder Options, particularly with seniors, and seniors really have the highest rate of vaccinations, which is wonderful. And I've spoken, again, this is not evidence, this is just conversations. I've spoken to people, talking about how to speak to their grandchildren, how to speak to their loved ones about vaccines. Do you have any advice about that, and how to have those conversations?
I think the first thing that I share with everybody is, don't make it a contentious conversation. At the end of the day, even for somebody you love dearly, it's still their decision. And just like I have a right to take care of my body or destroy my body, it is a personal decision. I think it's a fine line, because my personal decision to not be vaccinated does have the potential to affect other people, if I become contagious. But I think the biggest thing is not let it become contentious. So many people start the conversation off in an argumentative posture, and they don't give any credence to the fact that even if what the other person believes is incorrect information, they believe it for real. And it's easier to disarm through relationship than it is, pestering somebody with a bunch of data and facts, because typically, even if the person is wrong with the information that they have, there's a level of pride and embarrassment that kicks in if you start to realize that, well, what I've been believing may not be accurate. And so it just doesn't help to bombard people with just data and tell them how wrong they are, and try to heap them with guilt because they're not being vaccinated. We're better off to start it from a posture of relationship. And I would even say, if there's not relationship there, then it's probably not a conversation that should even be had, unless the person is asking. And even Jesus, to take it to my community, the faith community, there were people that asked Jesus questions all the time. And how he answered the question really was based on how sincere he believed they wanted to know the truth. If they were trying to trip him up or trying to get into an argument, he would answer at a very surface level and would not even take the time to go deeper, because it would do nothing more than spur an argument. But if they were sincere in their heart and they really were just trying to gain truth, he'd spend as much time as necessary. And that's the position that I've taken with family members, even with staff people. We have a staff of about 40 plus here at our church. And I want to say, of the 43 employees we have 40 that are vaccinated. But the 3 that are not vaccinated, we haven't made them feel like lepers. We haven't mistreated them or try to put any undue pressure on them. We try to let our example, be there for them. And that number was 6, but 3 of the 6 have since gotten vaccinated. And I think most of it just came out of relationship and finally being able to ask questions and be able to trust the person giving them the answers.
I from what I've seen, kind of that leading with your heart, leading with love and trying to understand, because it is hard. Everyone wants to make the best decision for themselves possible. That's the ideal. And you mentioned how Jesus approached questions. Are there any scriptures that you're leaning on right now, or they continue to fortify you during this pandemic?
I think the more than a scripture, I think it's a certain facet of the character of God. One of the names for God in the Bible is Jehovah Jireh, and that means the Lord provides, but it literally means the Lord who sees. And if you think about the word provision, the word vision means to see. The prefix pro is ahead of time or in advance. So provision means that God sees ahead of time, and because he sees ahead of time, he provides ahead of time. So as Jehovah Jireh, the one who provides for us even before the need shows up, I just rest in the comfort of knowing that even though 2020 and this COVID-19 was a huge surprise to all of us, it was not a surprise to God at all. And that he does have answers for us. And despite the horror of what COVID has done mentally and emotionally and physically in many cases, there has been some good to come out of this really bad situation. There are lots of us who slowed down enough during that time of being quarantined to realize things that we had made too important weren't nearly as important as we thought, and things that we had allowed to just kind of drift to the edges. We really went back and brought some of those things back to the forefront. There are a lot of families either grew a lot closer together or they really got ripped apart. And so I think it's allowed us to go back and put into perspective the things that really matter. So I've really just been trusting and leaning on the fact that God is with us at all times. He has not left us. He's not forsaken us. He promised that in the scriptures, and that he's seen all of this ahead of time. And though we don't know how it all wraps up and what the next phase of life looks like for us, God really does. And part of true faith is not just trusting God to work it out the way we want, but trusting that the way he allows it to work out is the best way for us.
Where do you go for we're talking about religion, now I'm going to talk about science. Where do you go for your reliable information with COVID-19? Do you have resources that you'd like to share with others, that are open to having these types of conversations?
It's a difficult one because, for every one resource you bring, somebody else will bring another resource that says that it contradicts that. But it's like everything, one study says you ought to eat eggs because they help with this. The other study says don't eat eggs because they hurt you in this area. And so I think there has to just be a level of comfort and trust that you have in the desire for our government officials to do right. I'm just not a conspiracy theorist to the degree that I believe our government is out to get rid of parts of our population or make us dependent upon the government through vaccinations. I really do believe in the goodness of the human spirit, and that in a situation like this that is this horrific, that our governmental leaders are trying their best to help. Now, is there a financial motive behind some of the things, the vaccines and all this? I don't think that Pfizer and Moderna or Johnson & Johnson are just out here for the public good. They're companies that want to make money. But I do believe that the leadership of our country is trying their best to get our country in a position where we can return to something that resembles normal. And so for me, I trust the sources of the CDC. I trust the sources of World Health Organization. But even with all of them, I think you listen, but you still have to put it through a filter of, how much of this, my own personal conviction and my own personal level of comfort, how much am I willing to act on personally?
How do you think people at home can help or get involved with advocacy? Not only, I guess, COVID-19 advocacy, but it's flu season and all the other things that are going on right now that are now in addition to COVID-19. Do you have any recommendations for how to start the conversation or how to get involved in the effort of getting vaccinated?
I think it starts with an individual effort. In the book of Joshua, Joshua said, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." And I think it starts there. I can't ask my family to do something I haven't done. I can't ask my community to do something that I'm not even talking to my own family about. So I've been vaccinated from the very first moment that I was eligible to be vaccinated. My wife is vaccinated. All three of our children, age 20, 18, and our 14-year-old, as soon as they became eligible, we made sure they got vaccinated. I just have a booster event planned for our staff happening next week, where we got the county coming out to do the booster shots for any and all of our staff and their families who are interested in receiving the booster shot. So I think it starts at home personally, and then I think it just starts with kind of having the mindset that the scripture gives us: "Am I my brother's keeper?" And some of this that I feel like I'm a healthy man who, if I came into contact with COVID and became symptomatic, I believe I would do well. I'm a man of faith. I trust God, but it's not even a matter of just me. There are people around me. And so my vaccination was not just for me, but it was for the other people around me who may not be vaccinated or who might be vaccinated, but are still immune compromised. And the vaccine just doesn't work as strongly for them. So I think that's the thing that's been the most frustrating for this last year and a half here in our country, is that I think we really had a chance to see just how selfish society can be, because we're more concerned about my personal rights as it relates to mask and no mask, or vaccine and no vaccine, and really haven't slowed down enough, in my humble opinion, to consider, how does my decision affect the people around me? And I honestly, and I can say this with all my heart, I honestly believe that if Jesus were physically here today, he would wear a mask and he would get vaccinated. And I don't believe he'd wear a mask or be vaccinated because he needed the mask or he needed the vaccination. He was the healer. He's the one who walked around healing people. But I do believe that his love for humanity and his love for his neighbor and what he taught us about loving each other would compel him to do that next step to be for the benefit of the people around him. I could be totally wrong, but there's certain things we won't know till we get to heaven and we can ask him face to face. But just what I see in scripture, I really do believe that Jesus would have cared enough about his brother. And so I think that's where it starts, that whether it's COVID-19 vaccination or the flu vaccination. I never got a flu vaccination for years. I got my first one, I think 3 years ago, when my daughter was going through a bone marrow transplant. 5 years ago, she's going through a bone marrow transplant and her immune system was wiped out. And so coming out of that, the hospital wanted everybody in the house to be vaccinated for the flu vaccine, because it could have been deadly for her. So we got vaccinated and have each year since then. But it wasn't for us. I've gone all these years and I rarely get any kind of flu symptoms, cold symptoms. I'm real big on vitamins and supplements and exercise, but I recognize that what works for me still could be harmful for somebody around me. And I think that's really where the conversation has to begin.
That's so true. And we talk about this. I've heard people at the Department of Health use the word cocoon, the most vulnerable, creating a bubble of protection, creating all of that. I agree heartily. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us about vaccinations or about upcoming events or anything else going on?
Well, no, I'm really grateful for the work that you and your organization do, especially as it pertains to the senior population. I really do believe in our country that it is a forgotten population at times. As we continue to try to get faster and expand more and become more tech savvy, it's great to have an organization whose emphasis is on those who have paved the way for the rest of us. And so I'm grateful for the opportunities we have to help serve our senior population. That's one of the reasons why we initiated that first vaccine event. We have a number of seniors in our church, and those were the ones who came to the front of the line first. The frustrating part is that the younger generation feels so invincible. They feel like they won't touch me. It's only for older people or people who have been ill in some way. And so it's just refreshing to see an organization that has put the time and effort into helping to make sure that population is taken care of. And I just wish that we can continue as Americans to step out beyond ourselves and do what we know is best for the community around us.
You can't say it better than that. That's really wonderful. I want to thank you for spending time with me this morning. I really, really do appreciate it and sharing your message with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
you.